For the last 25 years, I've been the coroner of Dauphin County, Pennsylvania. I've participated in nearly 3,000 autopsies. They say everybody has a story to tell, but I say everybody has a story to tell. It's my job to listen.
It's last call at Uptown Grill, and after a night out with friends, 39-year-old Clara Johnson is ready to head home.
All right, see ya.
Clara was waiting for a ride. She had called for a taxi cab, and a taxi cab never arrived.
Two locals are heading Clara's way and are happy to take her home.
You waiting for someone, honey?
Actually, can you give me a ride?
What's your name?
Clara.
Clara? Yeah, hop in. Where do you live?
Right around there. Thank you, guys.
The driver drops his buddy off,
See you tomorrow, John.
and Clara assumes she's next.
My house is just up there.
He drove past her house where she wanted to get off. He kept driving.
I missed my house. Can you turn around?
So she panicked, thought something was wrong.
She says, look, just drive me back to the bar.
What are you doing?
It's not gonna happen.
Stop your car!
Next thing you know, they ended up by the railroad.
Terrified, Clara tries to escape.
When he got off of the main road, she simultaneously jumped out of the car.
No, let me out! No, get out of the car!
A man got out of the car, and he started punching her about the face. Just blow after blow.
Clara's attacker beats her with a beer bottle, then pulls out a knife and duct tapes her mouth.
He took her down over this embankment, tied her up.
He grabbed at her shirt and ripped her shirt open, started ripping her clothes off, unbuckled his pants, and ultimately began to rape her. The railroad security that had been checking the lines came upon the scene.
The attacker knows he's been seen and runs.
She was tied up with duct tape, severely beaten. Just really, a sad sight.
Clara has survived the attack, and what she tells investigators is chilling.
He told her he was going to kill her and put her body in a ditch, and no one was ever going to find her.
And then he told me he was going to kill me like he did those other girls.
He said there were other girls.
That looked like he had done this before, and we needed to find those other victims.
The rape of Clara Johnson has suddenly grown into a potential homicide. Investigators need to consult with Dauphin County Coroner Graham Hetrick.
All right, look, I dropped my daughter off at school, and I got called by my deputy.
Mr. Granger.
He told me about the rape and brutal attack on Clara Johnson. I went from this happy moment to hearing about the horrific crime. He had duct tape, he had a knife, he had rope, he had virtually a working kit so that he could work out his fantasy of control. It pleased him that this poor woman would have to lay there beaten and bleeding and anticipate her forthcoming death. That is a very cold, sociopathic individual.
I'm glad you met me.
And investigators tell Graham something else that speaks volumes.
Curiously, on the rearview mirror was a necklace. I thought that necklace tied into another victim somewhere.
It is not uncommon for an individual involved in this type of crime to hang on to something significant of a previous victim. It's called the trophy.
Generally, when I'm called, it means there's a dead person. This was a little bit different. We first had to prove that a homicide has taken place.
Authorities trace the registration of the car, and it came back to Joseph Miller. Investigators track down Joey Miller, but he doesn't surrender easily.
Come on down, Joey! There's nowhere to run!
After a 6-hour standoff, he's arrested for the rape and assault of Clara Johnson.
Suspect is in custody.
I'm learning all these things from the investigator. I'm learning that Joey performed the rape, and he said that he would kill her like he did all the rest of the girls. Everything pointed to Joey being a killer.
Detective Tom Brennan pays Joey Miller a visit in jail.
Oh, Joey.
I went into the cell and I just said, Mr. Miller, I know this is not your first time out.
We know you killed that woman, Joey.
If it takes the rest of my life, I'm going to find out just who you killed.
And then you're not going to be smiling very much anymore.
Joe Miller started laughing.
I dumped them. Just threw them away. Like garbage.
You'll be seeing me, Joey.
You got nothing on me.
Joey claims he's killed other girls, but Graham and investigators have to prove it.
It all hinged on our ability to find the bodies. If we didn't, what we had was a man who would be charged with rape and assault. It's hard to say what his sentence would have been. I think between 10 and 20. But at his age, he's still a young man when he gets out. And we knew that couldn't happen.
If Joey has other victims, where are they?
The belief was that Joseph Miller took these women to areas that he was familiar with. The Swatara Township landfill area was an area that we knew that Joseph Miller had frequented.
He was known throughout the community what they referred to as a junker. This is an individual that goes around on trash days and picks up what they believe to be worthwhile junk.
The landfill is just a short distance from where Joey attacked Clara Johnson.
I think it was the fact that most people didn't go back there. The landfill was closed. Joey was familiar with it, and he could easily conceal a body.
Graham and investigators have no choice but to excavate the entire landfill.
It first started with the walk-around, and almost every good crime scene starts with a good walk-around. Because what you have to do is you determine what is the crime scene.
Okay, Ron, I think we really need to just try and consolidate our searches in this area, keep it very slow and methodical.
It was very important to have Graham on the scene to be able to differentiate what we were looking at. Where does it fit into all of the investigation?
Graham started directing the forensics people on how that scene should be excavated.
We can't afford to miss anything, not something that could have a blood stain, any small fragment of bone. We just need to stay focused.
It probably was close to 20, 30 acres. It was a big task. I knew right from the very beginning this is not going to be a simple process. It will be long and drawn out.
You're looking at the twigs, the leaves. Are they disturbed? Are they crushed? Or you might be looking for something that's piled up there that we have to search under. And we did a lot of that. We searched under a lot of tires and a lot of wood. We're dealing with a very, very heavily wooded area. Very humid and lots of bugs. We ran across snakes and everything else.
We didn't know what we'd find in there, so because of that, you have to set up a search pattern area and just look at the whole scene. It's like looking at a needle in a haystack.
Finally, they spot something. Clara Johnson has barely survived a brutal rape and attack at the hands of Joey Miller. And Coroner Graham Hetrick has reason to believe there might be other victims.
Joey said that he would kill her like he did all the rest of the girls. The only way we can confirm what Joey was saying is if we found those bodies in the landfill.
It's day one of the search when the team makes its first discovery.
My first question was, is this human? Once the decomposition takes place and the skin is gone, it's not always that easy to tell. There's 206 bones in the body, and many of them are very small.
The pressing question now, is this bone one of 206 in a human body?
Well, it's much too late. I think what we're looking at is a raccoon bone.
The search was arduous and long. Up to that point, that was the toughest case that I had worked as far as energy and time, effort.
The team needs a new plan, a way to focus its search.
We knew that Joey wasn't room for time. He did that as one of his odd jobs.
Graham suspects Joey may have dumped his trash and his victims in the same spot.
I want to try and consolidate the search and focus just on construction debris. Wood, shingles, tiles, drywall,
Guys,
stuff like
focus
that.
on construction debris only. Wood, shingles, tile.
These guys went through hell clearing that ground. Everything that was touched had to be done very slowly, meticulously, and everything had to be documented.
Finally, something that looks suspiciously ominous.
There was a pile of old wood and shingles with this car seat on top of it.
Somebody yelled out that there was another bone. After finding the animal bone, I was afraid it would be the same thing.
What have we got? Oh. But this time, Graham knows exactly what he's looking at.
We're almost getting down to the earth that they realize, oh, we got a skull there. That's interesting. Look at that. It's going right out through the eye socket.
Then suddenly, something else.
Graham, I think I found something over here too.
Under some shingles and some boards, we saw a leg bone sticking out.
The human femur bone is very distinctive. It's the longest bone in the body. And I could tell it was an adult human femur. If you find a skull or you find a femur, they're so distinctive to the human that's like hitting gold.
Graham focuses first on the skull, knowing it holds vital clues about who it belongs to.
The skull can determine the sex of an individual, generally by the massiveness of certain bones, by the arches above the eyebrows.
Well, we have advanced decomposition, but we can still see here the supraorbital arch, this ridge right above the eye socket. This looks like it's most likely a female.
The team finds more bones, and then some that are notably smaller than all the rest.
One of the more unusual things I found on this scene was fetal remains with the adult female. And you don't often see those, but there they were, and she was telling me I was pregnant.
I just picture pure terror and helplessness, not being able to do anything to protect not only her life, but the life of her baby.
Horrific as it is, the team stays focused on its mission, collecting nearly an entire skeleton and more.
There was a pipe found next to the body, and that had to be particularly preserved so it could be examined to determine whether or not that was in fact the weapon used to kill the victim.
When you have skeletal remains, one of the biggest things, besides identifying who the person is how was the person killed? And those are the things that the coroner's office, that Graham Hetrick is in charge of, trying to find out those answers so that we can then take the investigation from that point.
Dead people can't speak, but what they can do is tell their story. That's how they talk to me.
A closer examination of the skeleton will tell Graham who this woman is and how she died.
There was no tissue on the bones. This was an advanced decomposition, really a skeletalization. So it was there at least a year.
But there's a way to determine exactly how long the body has been buried.
There was a weed growing out of an eye socket, and that can be important because everything has growth rates, from your hair to plants.
Graham had the idea, which was a beautiful idea. Can we date the plant?
Vegetation measures approximately 13 centimeters in length.
A botanist would identify the species of the plant.
Chris, can you come over here and snap a photo of this one?
And he'd study the growth rate of the plant. The final conclusion was that it had been there maybe 3 to 4 years.
But who is this woman? And how was she killed?
The skull itself is just a tremendous source of data. The formation of broader nasal apertures, the shape of the skull in the back of the head, in the jaw area, these indicated it was an African-American woman. It was pregnant.
Investigators search missing persons reports, looking for anyone who disappeared 4 years earlier matching that description.
You could have anywhere from 1 to 1,000 missing person reports. And with Graham, in his examination of the body, we were able to narrow our focus down. Then is contacting the families.
While investigators search, Graham continues his work.
The skull was bashed in. Also, the jaw was displaced and actually was through this large gaping hole in the back of the head.
Graham compares the pipe found next to the body with the damage to the skull.
This woman was beaten to death by that pipe. And then covered up. So, we had ourselves a murder.
And the patterns between this victim and Joey Miller's rape victim are eerily similar.
The manner in which the victim was killed and disposed of was all similar.
If Joey Miller, who was the killer of this person in the landfill, we had serial killer. And the fact is that if Joey ever got out of prison again, he'd do it again.
After searching a landfill and finding the remains of a woman who's been beaten to death, Coroner Graham Hetrick believes accused rapist Joey Miller may in fact be a serial killer.
That week was a constant traveling from the landfill back to the morgue with evidence.
While the excavation continues, Graham is piecing together the uncovered remains.
At the end of that week, I knew I had an African-American woman who was pregnant, who was beaten to death. So now what we had to do was identify this female.
Investigators are scouring reports for a pregnant African-American woman who went missing in 1988 or 89.
There are females that go missing every year. Some are reported, some are not. We looked through all these reports from a number of different police departments. We were fortunate enough in this case that concerned family members had reported the female missing.
Stephanie McDuffie was 23 years old. She was pregnant at the time. I believe she was 8.5 months pregnant.
The McDuffies have waited for 3 years to hear something, anything about Stephanie.
1989 was the beginning of a hard year for the family. I was the last family member to see her. She was like, well, I'm going to go out for a little while.
Like Clara Johnson, Stephanie went to a bar, and the single mom never came home.
Y'all don't know. I know.
We prayed God would bring her back to us or send us a sign, to let us know that she was okay.
But days turned to weeks.
We would look for her. We would drive along the riverfront. We would drive across the river. We would drive back, uptown, on 6th Street, all the way down and back. We never gave up hope, and we always kept her in our prayers. We just wanted her to come home.
But are the remains unearthed at the landfill those of Stephanie McDuffie?
At that point, I knew I needed to find her identity.
Graham takes molds of her teeth, hoping dental records will positively identify the remains. As he waits, he comes up with an idea.
I decided to do a facial reconstruction, and then possibly we could get some identity off of that. I had to piece together and connect the skull so that it was solid. And then what I did was I put markers on the face. You start to add the muscles, the clay, and you make sure you hit those markers. Once you connect the clay, you're starting to see a face. We actually used glass eyes, and when I got her eyes in, and I'm looking at her, and she's looking back at me, that's a little bit of an odd feeling.
Investigators compare the image of Graham's facial reconstruction with a photo of Stephanie McDuffie.
They found a picture that resembled my clay mold.
And when the dental records come back, they're a match. With those of the reconstruction, Graham now knows exactly who he's looking at.
With reasonable medical certainty, we had Stephanie McDuffie.
Investigators deliver the heartbreaking news to Stephanie's family.
I'm afraid I have some bad news.
to get that phone call from a detective stating that they believed they found the remains of my sister.
We were able to positively identify Stephanie.
I think that was the point of where I lost it.
This was a horrible experience for the family, but it also brought closure for them, because up until this time they didn't realize what had happened.
I mean, it took away the not knowing, but it didn't take away the pain, and it didn't make it better. She's dead. Like, who wants to hear that? And how do you break that to her lovely daughters? How do you tell them that their mother's not coming back?
The thought of other victims motivates searchers at the landfill even more.
They never even left the scene. They just stayed there working. They literally took that ground down to the bare earth.
Guys were on their hands and knees, sifting through the dirt, trying to find bones.
The crisis team has been at the landfill for a week. And just when they wonder if their luck has run out, another critical find.
The rope was tied around a bone. It appeared to us that the victim had been tied up, and maybe even the rope was used to drag her back into that area. We had our second victim.
All right, let's bag this.
That was similar to the Claire Johnson assault. That she was dragged to a certain location.
The team focuses on the surrounding area, suspecting they're on the perimeter of another shallow grave.
After we dug down, and when you start seeing that first rib or a humerus bone, then you know, this is it. When we found the bone, we cataloged it. We knew we weren't going to find all 206 bones, but we could find enough to tell the story.
After searching the entire landfill, the team is still missing a critical piece of the puzzle.
There was no skull.
We needed to find out who was this person, and that was particularly difficult because we didn't have her skull.
The bones are transported to the morgue, where Graham begins his work. Even without the skull, the second set of remains has plenty to say.
The bone board helps us, number one, to know what bones we have and what is missing. It's a good working table for putting that jigsaw together.
Graham turns to another part of the skeleton to determine if this is a man or a woman.
The female hips are built for birthing. Even without the skull, I could tell from the pelvic girdle that this was a female.
Unless we could positively identify cause of death, he was going to walk on this homicide.
We needed to give Joey Miller's victims a voice so they could prove that he was a vicious murderer.
Coroner Graham Hetrick and his team have uncovered 2 sets of skeletal remains in a massive landfill, victims, they believe, of Joey Miller.
He had articulated his intent to kill somebody and said he had done it before, so we knew we had a killer. There's no way we wanted Joey out in the streets ever again.
This is where Graham's job becomes so important, because these individuals are dead. The only one that can speak for them about what happened to them are the scientists like Graham, who can say, this is what happened to them, this is why they died.
And evidence found close to the body might prove essential.
We found clothing next to the remains, and then the investigators put this out to the public.
The tattered remains of a shirt is all they have, but it's something.
The district attorney held a press conference. They displayed the piece of clothing that was found and asked the public if they knew anything about it.
Please contact Dauphin County investigators if you have any information.
A friend of the victim identified the clothing and called it in. She was able to give us the name of Selena Franklin.
18-year-old Selena Franklin disappeared in 1987.
We were able to determine that Selena Franklin went missing. Similar to what had occurred with the other women, Selena was last seen at a bar.
We now have another young black female. She's found. She was killed and buried in a shallow grave.
The evidence is compelling, but Graham needs certainty.
We needed Graham, since we didn't have a skull, to be able to come up with enough forensic evidence to say, this is Selena Franklin.
Without the skull, it's more difficult to identify an individual, but it's not impossible.
Graham does an intensive search of Selena's medical records.
When she had been admitted to the hospital for trauma to her shoulder, we found there was a portable X-ray.
The X-ray shows Selena's collarbone and her shoulder blade. Both have visible damage from a previous injury.
Looking at those two, we knew there was a potential link to identify her.
Graham takes X-rays of both bones collected from the landfill.
I found a radiologist out there that specialized in looking at peri to post-mortem X-rays.
Graham and the radiologist work all day comparing the X-rays.
There were many, many, many X-rays taken, so we had to get it into the exact position. It was a tedious process.
What do you see? I think here. Yeah. And you don't see it so much here. But you still see it, don't you?
But once we got the right angle, you could see that the compact bone pattern on the post-mortem X-rays fit those of the perimortem.
That's a match.
We knew at that point we'd identified Selena Franklin.
But investigators need more to pin this murder on Joey.
When the police found Joey Miller, his car, after what happened to Clara Johnson, they had found that necklace.
Graham and the team have long suspected that necklace belongs to one of Joey's victims. But is it Selena's?
Miss Franklin, I know this is very difficult, but we need you to identify something that we believe belonged to Selena.
Okay. This hurts.
We had these commonalities between all three of these cases. One had survived, two had not. But they all spoke of the signature behavior of Joey Miller.
Joey Miller still sits in jail on rape charges. He knows if they don't stick, he'll walk away a free man. But he has no idea what's coming when Detective Brennan pays him a visit.
What's up now, Detective?
I said, well, Joey, we found the bodies.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
She said, every once in a while I just get the urge to go out, pick up a black woman, rape her and kill her.
Make him beg for the life. And then I kill him. And I dump him.
I asked, what are you laughing at? He said, well, everything I told you was a lie. None of it's true.
I made it all up.
He was extremely cunning. And he was the type of individual that would bait you.
You're gonna rot in here for what you did to those women. You're gonna rot in here. Goodbye, Joey.
Keep wasting your time, Detective.
Joey Miller is charged with the murders of Stephanie McDuffie and Selena Franklin.
At this point, I knew Joey would be in jail the rest of his life.
But now, after finally piecing together these murders, something starts nagging at Graham.
I kept on thinking about a case I had worked on in which everything seemed to match up with Joey's modus operandi.
2.5 years earlier, at the very same landfill, a gruesome discovery.
My fellow was walking, and there out of the ground was a hand sticking up. I was called out, and we started to exhume that body.
The victim is Jeanette Thomas, a young African-American woman, last seen at a bar.
We have somebody that was buried in a clandestine grave that was raped and beaten.
It certainly sounds a lot like a Joey Miller murder. There's only one problem. Another man is in prison for the crime.
I couldn't help but think that Joey had a hand in this.
Graham Hetrick believes suspected serial killer Joey Miller might be the man behind another case from 2 years ago.
This woman was taken to a remote place and buried after being raped and beaten. Everything seemed to match up with Joey Miller.
But another man is already behind bars for the crime.
We already had this William Kelly, who was convicted of the murder.
At the time, William Kelly was 28 years old.
You raped her, and you killed her.
I don't understand.
Get off your chest. Admit it.
He had confessed to the killing.
Okay, I did it.
The confession is enough to put Kelly away. But can science place him, or Joey, at the scene?
In the realm of science, what you do is you have instincts, they become theories, and then you have to test the theories, or you're no longer a scientist.
At the time of the murder, DNA testing was rudimentary, and the DNA on the victim's underwear was never tested.
Thank God that the forensics had been properly collected and stored.
I'm sure. Can you ship this off to the lab? We're going to have some DNA testing done on that. Sure. Great, thanks.
Testing of DNA was much more accurate, and you could get it from a much smaller sample, so it was worth a try.
But will the DNA be a match to Joey Miller, or the man convicted of the crime, William Kelly?
The DNA on that victim matched Joe Miller.
We had an innocent man in jail for a crime that he never committed. A witness had identified William Kelly, who was very close in appearance to Joey, and then he was interrogated.
William Kelly was mentally deficient. A mentally deficient individual pled guilty.
Thanks to the work of Graham and his team, William Kelly is exonerated. And after nearly 3 years, he walks out of prison a free man.
Selena and Stephanie, through the information they gave us, helped us have an understanding of how Joey Miller operated, and in turn set a man free.
In March 1993, after pleading guilty to the rape of Clara Johnson, Miller goes to trial for the murders of Stephanie McDuffie and Selena Franklin.
The only way we could possibly link these cases together and attribute them to the same perpetrator was through the forensic evidence that was collected, organized, and examined by Graham Hetrick.
I tried to tell the story of those victims and then compare it to what had happened to the one that could still speak, and show that there's this signature behavior that can only belong to one person. The beating, the strangulation, the dragging, and then finally killed. These were all parts of his signature behavior.
But will the circumstantial evidence be enough to convict Joey Miller of murder?
They came back with a verdict of guilty for Joe Miller for these horrible crimes that he committed.
Joey is given consecutive life sentences.
He took a lot, and not just from our families. He took a lot from a lot of people's families. Stephanie was our guardian angel, and I miss her dearly, and I know she walks with me no matter what.
The women were speaking through me to the family. So I think what we did was we provided, although it was painful, the closure that they needed so that they could finally complete their grief. And to me, that's a very important thing.